come from a future that thing. And so some of the conclusions that we came up with just when we were wrapping up before this meeting, we had a really general discussion actually about the whole blogosphere, politics, and how it can be not just used, but what the engagement key issues could be. So these are just rough conclusions that we came up with in the end collectively. Number one is that the citizens are the most important part of blogging, and that's why they need to be taken more into account, and that's the connection should be maintained.
I think one of your panel members said that bloggers were more citizens than they were journalists.
Yes, well, it seemed to be that bloggers were viewed as a non-biased platform of a citizen speaking an opinion. So that was a general definition that seemed to come out of the day. Especially from a more official point of view, that seems to be what a blogger is. So that's why it seems to be important. But no, it is important. It is important. Sorry, I'm coming from a journalism background where sometimes we have this whole debate. You know, journalists, bloggers, where do they meet, where don't they? So yeah, I get. Anyway.
I've had that for the last 10 years of running politics in
Yeah.
Ireland. Only in the last 3 did I realise that I should just start calling myself a journalist.
Yeah.
In order to, get recognition or get people to start answering questions.
Yes. There's I know what you mean. One of the key things that all of the people mentioned was a continuity of the social media presence of the presidencies. Like one of the first topics was there actually an issue between the Danish presidency handing over Twitter accounts to the Cypriot presidency, etc., etc. Is that true? Was that an issue? Why couldn't it be more of a continuous flow of information of perhaps using the same Twitter account, bringing along the old followers? Obviously, in this particular example, maybe some Danes would drop off and Cypriots would join on, but a continuity of blogs, social media presence between the presidencies to try and get more than a 6-month feel for each country. Maybe even some people came up with the idea of having just the same logo, a presidency logo, a presidency blog, a presidency. Anyway, these are just suggestions. From the policy side, if the policymakers could perhaps go out looking for opinions from the bloggers in the social media sphere before they have to debate or talk about them. One example was talking on policy when we're talking to the esteemed deputy representative, why not go out and tweet about it the day before, see what the feel is on one opinion or one policy issue, and perhaps take it into account, perhaps not. See how it can complement what you're doing. Key is engagement, or actually responding from time to time to what you're seeing online. How to get messages outside of the EU bubble. That took us a while.
What were the issues around that?
Well, that policy talk doesn't really leave the EU bubble, and that how do you get that sort of EU speak to be more interesting, tasteful, I guess, to someone that isn't that familiar with it, and to pick it up.
Did any of your panel members have any suggestions on
how to do that? The $60 million question. How does Brussels become interesting to everyone? No. Yeah, I mean, they did, but it was more about talking in themes instead of... It was a general consensus was, let's talk about what people are interested in talking about. For example, environment, if there are conversations going on about that, make it more applicable to the themes that actually affect people's lives and the actual terminology of policies. And one of the last ones was not to forget the positives that Europe has offered as a result of the last 50 years, or even more recent members. So yeah, that was our general conclusions.
Okay, right, thank you. I know we are going in order from 1 to 4, but I think maybe the next one is Nicholas. Are you ready? Is that okay? Yeah. Nicholas' panel was Europe and the world closer to its neighbours. I sat in on one point where you guys were talking about ACTA and how that was quite an interesting occurrence in Europe. Do you want to?
Honestly, we haven't spoken on ACTA. We have more speak of at the first of EIS because yet new actor in the European level. And we have a great interesting discussion of the rule of the EIS to communicate, to use social media, because it is very difficult for EIS to have a simple language. And we have also a discussion on the motto of the motto of the European Union in foreign policy was to speak with one voice, and we have not the conclusion, but we have some illustration to communicate with one voice. Because when you communicate with one voice, the European Union, it takes some time, and it is not the times of the social media. And it is also not the language of the social media. And we have the thinking that the youth have to have a more simple, more engaged language to communicate to the people. It is difficult to communicate to the people without it. And also it is better to have more voice than just one voice. It is to have communications, and also the other effect is not only to have a communication come from Brussels to social media, but could use the delegation in the European Union. They are on the ground to communicate locally, to use social media, to have especially to communicate some information on the ground. I have one of the participants have the example of British diplomacy, or which each ambassador has a blog or use Twitters. But it is also a new way of thinking, because it is not only to use social media, but to have a new organization of the thinking. And it is one aspect of the discussion. This is some aspect, but one aspect of the discussion to communicate with different way. And we have seen this different way of communicating in the diplomacy of the member state. For example, the Nordic country use more Twitter on bloggers as the Latin country, and this is different use of the social media, but also different organization on the diplomacy. It's not a question of communication. I decide today to use that. It is not also an instrument. It's due to change the way of the diplomacy of the member state. And the social media in the foreign policy has a great impact, maybe outside European Union than inside the European Union. It is not also the question to communicate with citizens, but it's to communicate the citizens outside. and notably in the neighbors, in the Arab country, for example, or Eastern country, because this is more waiting, it is more expectation outside European Union than inside European Union for the foreign policy.
What we've noticed in Ireland is that all of the Irish embassies abroad have now started their own individual Twitter accounts, and what those accounts are doing is they're tweeting, you know, Irish issues for Irish citizens in those particular countries, but also they're tweeting about issues that are happening in those countries that people back in Ireland would actually be interested in and want to follow. And it wasn't just, you know, one embassy that decided to do this. It was actually the foreign ministry in Dublin that said, you know, we want more people, not just Irish people, but as many people as possible to become more aware of what we're doing in the world. Did your panel discuss at all how Europe is seen in the world? Did the panel discuss at all how Europe is seen in the world?
I think this is we could ask for one example of the difficulties to communication. If diplomat in delegation communicate, for example, of the demonstration in Cairo, what could a European diplomat say for the demonstration in Cairo before maybe official reaction of the European Union? But it is an example of the difficulties to have direct communication on that, because as I could say in short, restriction, I think the European diplomat is the life of the tweet. If begin to communicate directly his own feeling of, I don't know, of the Russian policy, it is of the railway station with a demonstration. I think it is not. I think the life of this diplomat, for example, in Moscow, it's at the end of the tweet. It is the end of the mission for this diplomat.
I think at one point your panel were talking about how powerful those tweets can actually be. I think somebody was saying that somebody was tweeting from inside the council chamber, and they were able to get their message out much faster than, you know, even writing a press release or talking to a journalist about, you know, getting a deal or not getting a deal.
Yeah, we have the example, for example, of some people that Herman Van Rompuy in the European Council say we have a deal, and he used a direct way to communicate to the citizen, also to the journalist. It is more important now sometimes for a journalist to be connected than to be just at the door of the Conseil. And it changed also the relation between the medias, the social media, and the power. And also we know that when Herman Van, this is an example, but when Herman Van Rompuy announced I have a deal, he hasn't really a deal. With 27 yes, it is maybe 24 more or less yes, and 1 and 2 are maybe to want to explain no, but they don't explain no. And after you go to the social media to say I have a deal, it is very difficult to say no. And it's changed also not only the way of the communication, but the policy. It is direct impact of the social media, and it is more easy. It is easier for Herman Van Rompuy to have a tweet, or Herman Van Rompuy, or the staff of Herman Van Rompuy, that to convoke a press conference also. And it is a real way to change the way to make the politics in the European Union, because and also you have different way. For example, we have in the foreign ministry we have called it or in the former Finnish foreign ministry Stubb, they use a lot the social media to have real information inside the room, and to have communication from insider to the outsider. And it is a bridge between the social media, do the bridge between the insider and the outsider. You have not the European bubble at, for example, for me, I wasn't at the last foreign council. I was 900 kilometers out, but I have internet. I have not the same information that my colleagues there in the room, or the press room, but I have around the same information because I was connected. This is the great difference, that the work of journalists, that I could do that, I don't know, a few years ago. If I was not in Brussels, I have not the information. And on the information I could have, the other could have also. And we have the same, it is the same equality between. Yeah, the laptop said. Yeah, and you have it is the equality of the information between the citizen, the media, and the politics.
Okay. Bernardo, your group, Europe with a better performing and growth-based economy. So your group decided how to fix the euro crisis, and everything is sorted now.
Well, that was the target. Well, my name is Bernardo. As you can guess by my accent, I'm not British nor Cypriot, but Spanish. And it's very strange for me to be here because for 10 years I've been sitting there with the presidency here and taking notes in the last months, in the last years, blogging as well, and in the last months tweeting. And now I'm here. Unfortunately, I don't have to report or to answer myself, but just to report the work of the wonderful people who I've been saying the panel, the bloggers, Carmela, Petre, Petros, Michael, Protisilaus, Connor, and Catherine. We've been talking, as you said, about the economic crisis, so it's like talking about Spain, in fact. The main conclusion was that for the last 2 years there was not a kind of direction from the EU. There were no progress, it's in the conclusion of the panel, even some contradictions in the conclusion from the EU summit, from the meetings. There was not fair play. Sometimes they agree something in Brussels and they go back to the capitals and they report something else. They just try the national government, to take the good points for themselves and blame all the guilty on the European Union and the European institutions, and that's create confusion, and it's leaving people with the sense that the European Union is not doing nothing for them, and in some cases even is doing something against them. My colleagues said that the main role for protecting people against this crisis in general is up to the national government, but the role of the EU should be to give a framework, a coherent framework to do that, and it should be done in a way that they avoid the breakup of the European Monetary Union. That most of the panelists agree that there is a risk that it can be destroyed if the crisis is not solved. And coming from Spain, and there were some panelists as well from Italy, another country on risk, and from Cyprus, and we agree mostly that there is a risk that an attack, or a so-called attack, could happen on next month, in August. Fortunately, we talked to the permanent representative of the Cyprus government, Mr. Cornelius, and they said that even if they are going on holiday, the new technologies allow for having teleconference and react to anything that happens during the coming weeks, so that is some relax coming from Spain. On growth, we the main point was that there is not a clear role for the European Union. The EU budget is very small. Most of the panelists agree that the EU structural funds have been positive, and cannot be blamed for the problems in the countries, even if there is a coincidence that these countries, Greece, Ireland, Spain, Portugal, have been the most beneficiaries of these funds. There is no, my colleagues don't see any relationship in these two issues. And there are doubts about what can be done at EU level for the growth, and there are doubts as well about the so-called firewalls that have been created for protecting the EU countries in difficulties. Around that conclusion of economics, there was a big debate on communication, how is communicating the EU in general terms, but as well in this economic crisis. And the main conclusion is that there is a big problem of communication between the EU and the public opinion. Who can be blamed? Well, there's seems to be a safe responsibility. From one side, the European Union the European institution doesn't seem to know how to communicate, to be understood outside this building or outside this European neighborhood. There is as well apparently a responsibility for the traditional media that try to shape the public opinion in a very simplistic way, don't stimulate the debate, don't transmit the good news or the bad news about the European Union in a comprehensive way that can create a European public opinion. Very interesting from my point of view, given this context on blogging, there was a conclusion that even when the European Union or the European institution or the European authorities use the new technologies, they miss the advantage of these technologies. They use it in a very traditional way, as someone mentioned before, just putting the communique and the press release, but don't use the possibility of the interactive communication with the public opinion. So they miss this grand opportunity. And the last conclusion, and very worrying, given that in the panel there were very young people, is that the European Union cannot survive in this way. That the European Union has to adapt to the 21st century or will disappear, because it's working with methods and ways coming from the 20th century, from 60 years ago, and they are not fixed anymore for these times.
Thanks very much. Just before we go on to the last panel, I can give a very quick story about the power of social media and how social media can actually challenge the traditional relationships between journalists and governments. About 2.5 years ago, the weekend that the IMF were actually rolling into Dublin, the Irish government were denying that any conversations were taking place, saying no, absolutely not having any discussions. So traditional journalists were trying to see if there was a story. They were being told that there wasn't a story, so they were just ignoring it and moving along. And then people on social media, on politics.ie, started going, well, I've just watched a German news program, and they have a spokesperson for the European Commission in Berlin saying, yes, actually, there are discussions taking place. Ended up going onto the BBC. BBC reported it. BBC journalists have since said that they were following it up on social media because people were finding out information for themselves online. Sunday newspaper wrote a rather blistering attack on the BBC for saying that the IMF were coming in, which wasn't true. Ministers went out on television and recorded a show at lunchtime to say no deal has been done. The IMF are not coming in. Then 9 p.m. that evening, before that programme went out on air, the government had to finally admit, yes, actually there were discussions, and the IMF were across the street in the hotel. So there is that power, I think, of social media and actually fact-checking and going out to various sources and actually getting access. Anyway, last but not least, the panel was Europe more relevant with citizens with solidarity and social cohesion. Eric.
Yes, I can follow up what has been said by Bernardo. In our panel, we talked about ACTA, and we came to the same conclusion as Bernardo. The European Union cannot go on communicating the way it does. It will not really survive. If you look at the ACTA agreement, it was kind of a first victory for the internet and for the blogosphere, but not the bloggers alone were the guys that could claim victory. It was in close association with the European Parliament. So some of the panelists that were blogging on ACTA told us it was very crucial, really crucial for this success to have MEPs on board, to communicate with MEPs and to create a real movement on the street, down in the streets in several countries like in Germany. So for the first time we had this new association between the internet sphere, MEPs in Strasbourg and in Brussels, and people down in the street. And this was obviously very important even for the European Commission. We had one participant from the Commission who told us that even in the commissioners' meeting there are talks now about the blogosphere, and obviously the Trade Commissioner Karel de Gucht said that it was the bloggers' fault that ACTA fell finally. So this is really a new phenomenon, and we think it shows that the European Union sometimes is really very distant from the public opinion and from the people. And on the other hand, that the internet can help to correct things and perhaps to get once again in touch with the people.
I think every panel
discussed at one point, or at a number of points, that there are major deficiencies with how the EU communicates with its citizens. And I think what's interesting about ACTA, just as a kind of as a case study, I think, is that it was citizens who decided that they were going to bring the EU closer to them. That if the politicians and if the institutions weren't going to actually communicate coherently, they were going to talk back. And I think that's something that's it's pretty. I think it's pretty strong, and I think it's definitely a message I hope that this presidency and I hope that the subsequent presidencies take up. Was there anything else that was?
Yes, we also talked about the issue of youth unemployment and of the social crisis that's spreading in the southern part of Europe, in Greece and Spain, Italy and so on. And this was another case study, because there you can see that that you cannot really rely on the European Parliament. You have no connection. The European Parliament is not really involved in issues related to the euro crisis or to youth unemployment. And so there are many local movements, many local bloggers, but the connection is not working. There's no such connection as was with ACTA that would create a global European movement and could perhaps change things. So with regards to unemployment, it would perhaps be more efficient more efficient to give informations to the people, to the citizens. For example, to tell them where they can get funds, where the funding is, what kind of EU programs can help to fight youth unemployment in a community. That would be a way to tackle this problem. but it is very different from this ACTA thing. And then we had a third debate on practical proposals for the presidency, and I think one point is worth mentioning. Many bloggers guys said it would be good if the Cypriot presidency could build some kind of a platform for bloggers. For example, if on the internet homepage you could reproduce some important information provided by social media, by tweets, by blogs and so on, or if you could create something like press clippings for social media. We all have press clippings here in the European Commissions. I mean, as journalists, for example, you can get access to this, but it only refers to the old media, the traditional media. It would be very good to set up something for the social media.
Okay. Did you want to come back, or? Okay. Well, guys, thanks very much, and thank you for to the participants. Before the walking lunch, I'd like to invite the Deputy Permanent Representative of Cyprus, the EU Ambassador, George Zodiats, is that correctly? And to make the closing address.